within the Appalachian Mountains, I bring you yet another episode of Surviving Weimerika, where we try to come down to what the persistent problem is in the West, and we also discuss various different nationalism, even within the European continent. And tonight we have a rather controversial one for you guys. And I know there are some people in my audience that are well acquainted with the Balkans and the Balkan situation. Well, there is a country there that is often maligned and often misunderstood, and it's even questionable sometimes if this particular country is a part of Europe, that is spiritually and ethnically. But I have some guests here that would like to clarify some of the points, the finer points of Albania. And like I said, I just want to let you guys know every guest that comes on my show does not necessarily reflect that of my observations or my opinions. My opinions and observations and my political ideology are strictly on my own. This is a sort of show where we explore other aspects of the European diaspora here in America and the greater European psyche and soul. So I'm going to now bring it over to our guest, who is Drago and Cadmus. They're going to discuss a little bit about Albania, about the Albanian, pagan revival, and also about the kind of dynamics in their country. So go ahead, take it away, guys.
Hello, man. I would like, first of all, to thank you for inviting us to your show. I'm honored. I'm truly honored. And before that, we would like to clarify a little bit who we are. Both Cadmus and I, we belong to a group called Albanian Third Position. We are present on Instagram at Albanian Third Position. We're present on Facebook, but our name in there is in Albanian, so it's kind of useless to say it in here since most of the audience isn't Albanian.
Okay.
Yeah, who we are? Like we, as I said, like politically, we are of the third position. Very generally, you could call us fascist, but not fascist in the way of Italian fascism, but like the umbrella term. We are of the opinion that at the core of fascism lies the fact that each people has its own racial makeup, genetics, has its own geography and history, and there is a form of government which is special for each unique ethnicity. And we are trying to find out what's that for Albanian. Our purpose is also to like discuss topics who mostly regard Albanian's relations with with other peoples, especially if they are from Europe. What we are attempting to do is like through our articles, through our writings, and from time to time art to kind of wake up the Albanian people, tell them, listen, there's something deeply wrong going with our country and generally speaking with the European race. This is the problem. This is the source of the problem. We've told it to you now. You know what you have to do. You know where these issues come from. We're not a political organization or any organization of any kind. We're just a group of friends, like just a bunch of disgruntled patriots who want to tell the truth about the world we live in, I guess. What we also like to do is, okay, considering how Albanians have a very bad reputation in Europe for reasons I think I don't have to mention. The audience should know, I guess.
They have kind of a mafia culture, don't they, where they control a lot of organized crime. Is that so?
That's exactly, or as some, let's say, anti-Albanians I've had the displeasure of meeting have put it, we are the Mexicans of Europe. And on top of that, it's like the fact that we are at least nominally majority Muslim, that doesn't give us necessarily positive reputation among right-wing or third positionist groups throughout Europe. So there's that as well. I mean, at the end of the day, the Russians commit crime, the Poles commit crime, other Eastern European migrants commit crime, but they sort of get away with it in the eyes of the aforementioned groups because they're at least nominally Christian. We aren't, so we get a lot more flack. Yeah, and alongside that, and because of that, and because of this whole Balkan conflicts about, irrelevant patches of land. It's very common in the Balkans to like kind of question the origins of the peoples you arrival with, and the Albanian European origin is questioned a lot. It literally questions our legitimacy as a people and as a nation, like whether we should exist in the first place. So
yeah, there's some. I don't mean to interrupt you, but there's some contention
go on.
on even in the chat presently. If you guys are,
Yeah, I'm going to check it out.
Okay, well, if you guys are Illyrians, which they're saying is a constructed type of identity, or if you guys are kind of indigenous to the area, or whether you guys were imported by Ottomans. I believe that's what some people are trying to say.
Especially the last one. It's very popular among the Serbs. They think that we stem from the Caucasus Mountains, and we were brought some had magical powers.
Sorry about that. Could you repeat that? We disconnected here for a minute.
Oh, I apologize for that.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, no, it's not your fault. It's my internet connection. I got unfortunately my internet connection's acting up. So we got interrupted here for a minute. Sorry about that, guys. Technical difficulty. So go ahead.
Yeah, as I was saying, like the Serbs especially, they like to say a lot that Albanians aren't native to the area. We were imported by the Ottomans from the Caucasus Mountains in the 15th century towards the Balkans, despite the fact that the area they refer to was not controlled by the Ottomans in the 15th century, but whatever. Yeah, we have debunked that in a couple of articles in our page, and I will talk a little bit about that in here more in depth later on. But for now, let's kind of ignore the lies and let's start with what is true. I would like to say a couple of words about the earliest Albanian history, the Illyrians and the Illyrian origin. Now, the Illyrians were an Indo-European people who used to inhabit the western part of the Balkan Peninsula back in what is known as classical antiquity. They were considered by the Greeks and the Romans as barbarians. We don't really know much about them, except for the fact that they were supposedly very, very good mercenaries. As when it came to being like flanking troops and like skirmishing troops, they were among the best. They were hired a lot by the Praetorian Guard and the Alexander's army and even the Greek city-states. And there are many, many conflicts. They like to hire Illyrians.
Any relation to the Thracians?
Yes and no. We could be this is the thing. We don't know much neither about the Illyrians nor about Thracians. But from what we know, it seems that they belong to the same cultural nexus, so to speak, which modern historians define as Paleo-Balkanic. The Paleo-Balkans, the old Balkans.
Yes.
So that's there are some commonalities in our religions. So you could say that the people are indeed somewhat related, but it is not known to what degree, as we have yet to make full genetic tests of Thracian and Illyrian skeletons that have been found. So yeah, there's that. It's unfortunate, but I guess we will have to wait and see what modern geneticists have to say on this topic. So I would give the answer. We are somewhat related, but we do not know to what exact degree.
Okay.
Yes, as far as linguistics goes, we know some Illyrian words from inscriptions, and some of these words are present in the modern Albanian language. I'm not going to give any examples because, it's Albanian. Nobody will understand it anyway. There's other than that, Albanian has a ton of loanwords from ancient Latin. I'm talking pre-1st century Latin, which means we must have been in the area since then, because the Latin language has shifted a lot throughout the course of the Roman Republic and later on Empire. So it's easy to pinpoint, okay, from what century certain loanwords come. We also have loanwords from ancient Greek as well, which weren't present in medieval Greek. So I guess that is an indication that we are native to the area. Yeah, I guess
something interesting to point about is the fact that you have even some Proto-Albanian borrowings from ancient Greek You can find it in Alkmann's works. He was a poet of Sparta. So
Mm,
this points to a very, very old presence of the Albanians.
mm. And that's very interesting. Actually, I didn't know that, but there's also the fact that there is this map made by a Greek geographer of the 2nd century. He was called Claudius Ptolemy, and like you could regard this as a mere footnote, but he made like a map of the Roman Empire and like the different peoples that inhabited it, and like in the place where
Yeah,
today.
that's the guy that came up with the early form of heliocentric theory. So I'm
Oh
familiar.
really? Oh,
Yes.
I didn't know that. That's very
Yeah.
interesting. I know him. I know him because in one of his maps, he basically like makes, says
He
like
was a great
here.
astronomer.
Okay, okay. I actually didn't know that. But basically, according to him, like in the map that he created about like the Roman Empire, he mentions the Albanians. Like he calls the tribe Albanoi, which means Albanians in Greek, and he positions us at the what is today northern Albania, like the northern half. So, furthermore, regarding our origins, we have genetic evidence about Albanian, like about the genetic makeup of current Albanians, and we clustered. First of all, we are in the same supercluster as Europeans, and as for our own mini cluster, we
Would you like me
cluster.
to show them the map that the
Yes,
two?
please,
Okay, I'm
please.
going to show
The
them the
one, the
cluster
one I
map.
modified with paint. The one I
Yes.
modified with paint.
Let me show you. Okay, go ahead. Tell them about the cluster map.
Is it visible? Because I
Yes, it's
don't
visible.
see it.
Yes.
Okay, so basically, I have circled in there in red the Albanian, the Albanian cluster. Yeah, okay, I can see it now. And in blue, it's like where the Greeks are positioned. I think if you look at it, the Bulgarians should be also close by, like as turquoise triangles. Point is, this is a principal component analysis test, meaning that this kind of test comes from the result of the study of the entire DNA, not just like the ones that is found in the Y chromosome, but like also in the autosomal chromosomes. And basically, this shows how close or how far different populations are from one another. And it should be obvious that the closer to two clusters are, the more related they are, and the further they are, the less related they are. Albanians are extremely close to the Bulgarians, the Greeks, and other Balkan populations. So if we are some sort of, as they very eloquently say, Turkish rape babies, then the Greeks are such, the Bulgarians are such, the Serbs are such, and surprisingly also the Central Italians are somehow Turkish rape babies. So that myth is easily debunked with a very simple exam. If you want to read the paper, look up Lazaridis and colleagues 2014.
Okay,
That's where
it's a very
this
recent
graph is
paper.
from. 2014.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question also. Were there like any taboos, local taboos, when it came to the local Ottomans from mixing with them? Because I understand, this is the way I understand a lot of Islamic conquerors. When they go into non-Islamic lands,
Mm,
they'll have like segregation between Christians and Muslims. A lot of people don't
mm,
realize they don't automatically rape, people. I mean, they do. They don't get me wrong. They do rape. They do take women. They do take. I mean, that's just warfare. Rape is just a
mm,
product of
mm,
warfare. However, there are taboos in regards to to mixing between Christians and Muslims. So what happens a lot of times is Christians will convert to Islam because of the high jizya tax or because of the high sort
mm,
of. They also have this thing called mawali. Mawali. That's Arabs. I don't know about the Ottoman Turks. I'm not too
mm,
familiar with them. I do know the Ottomans, the way they kind of ruled over their subjects is they would allow their subjects their own kind of autonomy within their own
mm.
empire, and they
Yes.
would not molest with them that much. They would not fool with them. They would just allow self autonomy. They did this in the Levant. They did this in, I believe, in Egypt. Not to say that there hasn't been any miscegenation,
Mm.
because there was. I mean, these areas have been
I mean,
conquered, and that happens, unfortunately. I believe Genghis
yeah.
Khan even conquered portions of Eastern Europe up to probably up to portions of Northern Europe. But anyway, I'm just wondering though, like, is the miscegenation exaggerated in these areas?
I would say yes, because the thing is, we have reports of Albanian women who would like, they knew they were about to be captured by the Turks, and they would get raped if they were unlucky, or kidnapped if they were lucky, and they would just like straight up kill themselves. Like if they were on top of a cliff, they would fling themselves off cliffs, or if they were like, if they had a dagger or maybe a gun late, like from the 16th century onwards, they would just blow their brains out and
And
put an
then
end to that.
there was quite a taboo. So how did you guys end up like 70% Muslim?
Well, as you said before, it was basically for tax evasion, to put it in very modern, banal terms. Um, we're a poor people. We don't have money. We didn't have money back then, and it's the same in these days. So rather than pay taxes, to the Ottomans, let's just do this nominal conversion, and kind of get away with it. Furthermore, under Muslim law, I'm sorry, you are not allowed to carry any weapons as a Christian, or even as a Jew. So for Albanians, like, guns were our livelihood. We're mercenaries. Without guns, we would be worthless. So we converted in order to keep our guns. And if you look at the 30% of the Albanians who did not convert, they are mostly from like remote mountainous areas who were technically never conquered by the Turks, but like just paid lip service to the Sultan in order to remain unmolested and remain de facto independent, despite the fact that no map would show them as an independent state back in the day. So yeah, it's basically like the conversion to Islam, the so-called conversion, was done for very, very pragmatic reasons. Nothing, no spiritual reason. Furthermore, Albanians aren't really religious. Like, people like to point out that, okay, during the communist era there was like state atheism, and that's why Albanians aren't very religious, which is not true. Back when we were fully Christian, like, travelers from the West would cross through Albania, and they would say about how Albanians did not know whether they were Orthodox or Catholic, and they would go to both churches. Later on, the same happened during the Ottoman era, when like Muslims would go to church and Christians would go to the mosque, just to kind of like be on the safe side. It was, Albanians aren't religious. Like, it's not in our racial makeup to be religious. We are not completely devoid of spirituality, but like not really given
So
to
you're
the
telling
stuff.
me that most of Albanians are kind of Christian or Muslim in name only, and they don't really practice or
Yes,
adhere
yes,
to most
yes,
of those
yes,
traditions.
yes. And what's surprising about it, that this has changed only very recently. Like, only recently you will see Albanians who are like, genuinely supporting fucking ISIS or other lookalike terrorist groups. It's a very recent phenomenon. I'm going to quote now. Because I'm getting ahead of myself. In the early 20th century, there was this British traveler who came through Albania. She was very interested in us and what we did and how we did. And I have some quotes from the books she wrote about Albanians, which I would like to to quote in here,
Go
and
ahead.
like
Go ahead.
kind of, and these are from 100 years ago. These are not recent. These are from an era where people were supposedly more religious than we are now. Okay, the Albanian is always an Albanian. The Muslim Serb and the Muslim Bulgarian have all sense of nationality swept away by the mighty power of Islam. They are reputed the most fanatical Turks in Europe, and they are greatly dreaded by their Christian kinsmen. Turk, it cannot be too strongly said, means in the Balkan Peninsula Muslim, and has nothing to do with race. Many Turks know no Turkish and speak pure Serb. With the Albanian, it is otherwise. He is Albanian first. His religion comes afterwards. The celebrated fights among the Albanians are always intertribal, or quarrels of rival beys. Bey means lord in Turkish. Christians may then fight Christians, and Muslims may then fight Muslims. The Christian Albanian persecutes the Christian Slav, and this hatred is very old. Of all the passions that sway human fortunes, race hatred is perhaps the strongest and the most long-lasting. And another one. We Albanians, said the Albanian interpreter to me recently, have quite peculiar ideas. We must have freedom. We will profess any form of religion which leaves us free to carry a gun. Therefore, the majority of us are Muslim. Meaning, and this was like 1910. And people back then were far more religious. Like, if you look at the West, people used to go to church far more often. And back then we were already like making fun of Muslim. Oh yeah, there is another one as well. Wait a second. This one is the most interesting in my opinion. A good Muslim should turn towards Mecca and pray 5 times a day. I have spent day after day with Muslim gendarmes and horseboys, like Albanian Muslim gendarmes and horseboys, and never have seen an attempt at prayer. But on the other hand, once, when passing some soldiers from a Turkish regiment who were devoutly praying by the wayside, my mounted escort pointed them out to me and laughed as though this was the best joke in the world. 1910, when everybody is like obsessed with religion, with Abrahamic religions, Albanians are already making fun of it. So I mean, this sort of idea where we are like these fanatical Muslims who are out for Serbian Christian blood falls flat on its face. I mean, people can say whatever they want, but this is black and white. This is what actual historians have said. So.
And just to reiterate for the chat, you guys are not non-whites.
No. I mean, I don't want to dox myself or anything.
Okay,
so
I understand.
You have to take my word for it. But
they don't claim to be non-white guys. So there you go.
No, we are 100% Aryans, if we can say so, at least Indo-Europeans. And I said Aryans on purpose because, as I said earlier, my mother is blue-eyed and blonde-haired. My sister is also blonde-haired, and my cousin is often mistaken for an Englishman or a Frenchman because he has blue eyes and blonde-haired. So in Albania, you have lots of people with blonde hairs and blue eyes. It's common.
It's not like the most common phenotype will of course be brunette, like dark haired and stuff, but we are no darker or no lighter than the neighboring countries who are so fanatically Christian. And the funniest thing is this, and I think I mentioned this before. If one of these white nationalists from Western Europe looks at a person from like a dark-haired person from the Mediterranean, and that person is good looking, he is suddenly a proud son of Rome. But if that person is not good looking, he is like a Turkish roach rape baby. So it's the halo effect, it's just the halo effect that people are being fooled and they can't even see it. So
yeah, you're saying that pretty much whatever their appearance, if they're attractive or not, that's how they determine what their ethnicity is.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So
yeah, I can get that.
And unfortunately, I must say that Albanian men aren't the most handsome. Somehow our women are gorgeous, but we aren't. Yeah, Okay, so now I would actually like to leave the word to Cadmus because I'm pretty sure
there's a lot of people that would like to get into the sort of they'd like to talk more about pre-Christian Albania and also a little bit about the kind of revival of paganism in Albania. And before you do that, let me ask you a question. Like the Christian population in Albania, what are the primarily what are they?
Sorry, in what sense? What are they?
Well, I mean, what
you mean
what denomination?
Orthodox or Catholic?
Yes.
Well, I think that in the 30s they were more Orthodox Albanians than Catholics, but nowadays, with the latest demographic studies, I think that there are mostly Catholics, Roman Catholics, and you have even some Protestants now.
Okay.
Yeah, but they're usually just like converts.
1%
So, like less than 1% and stuff. So, but the two major denominations are like Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic.
Okay. How did Christianity get there?
Oh, in Albania, well,
The legend has it it was Saint Paul himself that
Okay.
converted
Is that true, though?
Albanians.
Is
Yeah.
that true?
okay, we know he was in Illyria because that is mentioned in the Gospels, but but the thing is, the thing with Christianity is that it first spread out to cities, like
Okay.
into urban areas, and most Illyrians back then they did not live in urban areas, so actual Christianity must have spread later through like later missionaries who are also lesser known. Saint Paul may have converted some few hundreds in major urban areas, but nothing more.
Okay. So
Yeah,
let's go ahead.
for sure. In around the 11th century, most of Albanians, I believe, they were still pagans.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about, let's get into sort of pre-Christian Albania. I think we talked a little bit about the Illyrians before, whether that's a constructed identity or whether that's an authentic identity. I don't know. I can't say for sure. I'm not from the Balkans, but I'm not going to question it right here on this stream per se, unless like you guys have anything else to say about it or the audience might have. So let's go into kind of pre-Christian Albanian kind of the spiritual practices.
Yeah, would you like to take this, Carlos, or should I? Like, you can talk more about the esoteric stuff if you want.
That's fine.
About the esoteric stuff, well, first you mentioned the Illyrians, and as we said, there are very few documents, sources about what were their practice, their religious practice. But we do know something that still survive among Albanians, which is quite fascinating stuff. Like, for example, you have the snake cult. We found snakes all around in Albania. They carved it in houses, like protection against evil eyes, demons, or sometimes these snakes represent like uh, the penat or the penates. I don't know the English word for this, but it's like the spirit of the family, the ancestor.
The pineal gland, right?
No, it's the Latin word, but I'm very bad in Latin, so it's more about the snake representing like the spirit of the family and
The genius, the genius.
yes,
Okay,
the
so
genius, yeah.
if anyone is familiar with Roman or Greek paganism, they had this like idea of familiar spirit, which is like kind of like a totem, and it was usually an animal. In the Romans called it genius or genius,
Yeah,
as we would
genius.
pronounce it.
It's like an altar within the house, within the
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
Whereas the Greeks would call it daemon, not
yeah,
demon.
demos, demos.
Or
Demos
demos.
Yeah.
There is also, and for those who are familiar with the Germanic paganism, the Germanic pagans would have called it fulgia.
Okay.
It's an equivalent to that, like the snake. The snake is also a protector of the house. Like if you see a snake inside your house in Albania, you're not allowed to kill it.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's basically it says that it protects the house, but keep this in mind. Most snakes in Albania are rattlesnakes, or unless you provoke them, they're harmless. So.
Really? Wow.
Mm.
Do you guys like handle snakes?
Oh no,
Yes,
no.
I did.
You
I
have,
did
okay.
actually. I went to a lake, and my passion back then was to catch snakes. And back at the time, I didn't know much about Albanian paganism, but I feel that this was like an indication, an orientation of my deepest soul. You know, like an archetype that says, "Hey, you're an Albanian descendant of the Illyrians. Go on and catch snakes. You'll find them very interesting." And yeah, I never was afraid of snakes, and to this day I quite like them as creatures. And I'm getting to the point that this love for snakes, you found it in the personality of a character in history, of Alexander the Great's mother. Olympias was her name,
Oh yeah, oh
and
yes.
she was so passionate about snakes that she was heavily involved in cults with snakes. And
Mm.
if you have seen the Oliver Stone's movie Alexander, you might remember Angelina Jolie playing around with snakes.
I don't, let me just interject here. I don't recall, like, I'm not an expert in, like, ancient Indo-European lore or, like,
Mm.
deep lore in Indo-European traditions, but is that found, like, that doesn't sound like an Indo-European, like, lore. That sounds like that has more in common with, like, say,
Neolithic
sort of
farmers.
ancient Egypt or, yeah, kind of Neolithic traditions
Neolithic
around
farmers.
Anatolia.
Uh,
So
uh, uh,
where
I mean,
so is that found in Indo-European traditions?
it's kind of hard to pinpoint because the thing with as far as I know about the Indo-European tradition, it's like there's this rule of thumb regarding snakes, which is kind of silly because on one hand the snake um on one hand the snake represents, you know, like the enemy of the hero, the obstacle the hero must overcome. But on the other hand, snakes sometimes are like, you know, figures of wisdom. They are sources of wisdom which the hero might need. As far as I've noticed, you know, the small snakes tend to be benevolent or at least neutral, and the large snakes like Jormungandr in Germanic paganism, they are the evil ones. They're
Yes.
the agents
Yeah,
of
I've
chaos.
noticed that. I've noticed that they're
And you find that in
okay.
Albanian spirituality as well. Like the small snake is considered a protector, but the large snake, we call it the kuchedra. It's something like a hydra, more or less. Like
Yes.
the large snake-like creature is the enemy of the hero. It's the obstacle which the hero must vanquish.
Yeah, do you guys have any epic tales like the other groups in Europe?
Um, actually, we do, but they're not quite God related, but they're more like connected. They're more like connected to the hero itself. Like it's the protagonist is not a god; it's a hero. Um, the most famous epic would be the one of. Okay, I'm going to say his name in Albanian now. Gjergj Lezalia. Gjergj is like the Albanian equivalent of George. I'm going to call him George from now on. George was this Albanian hero who was like he was wounded and he had 9 wounds in his body, and for 9 years his sister took care of his wounds. And during the 9th year, this like the Black Knight who came out from the sea, and like, you know, seas are very often related with snake-like figures. He would come out from the sea and he would go from village to village, and every month, and he would like kidnap a few virgin women, so he could like, I don't have to say it what he wanted to do with them.
Okay, yeah.
And it was time that like George's village was like, the next target of the black snake-like knight. And the only virgin woman, because it was a small village and most women were married, the only virgin woman was like his sister. And basically, George had to, like, despite his wounds, who had to be taken care of constantly, otherwise he would die. He like donned his armor. He went out in the field. He faced this Black Knight, despite the fact that this Black Knight was far larger, stronger, better armored, better armed, etc. He vanquished him, and then he died because of because that's how long his body could go on, and this kind of parallels the myth of Thor. Like when Thor faces Jormungandr, he defeats him, then takes 9 steps, or I think 7 steps. I'm not sure which one of the two. And after these 9 steps, he dies.
Okay.
There is
Yeah.
another legend about Muya and Halili. There are two brothers of Albanian legend, and they go on adventures and defeat different enemies. And the thing is that they are, I think, they are twins, and they are quite. They remind of the Dioscuri, the Castor and
Oh,
Pollux.
okay. So in the like overarching Indo-European mythology, there is this myth about the twins. The twins are two divinities, or sometimes gods or demigods, who one of whom is like, you know, more divine than the other, but they both work together to, you know, in their myths and stuff. Like, for example, in Vedic myth there are the Ashvin. In Greek myth there are the Dioscuri, Castor and Pollux, as Cadmus said. In the Anglo-Saxon myth there's Hengist and Horsa. And the most well-known example would be that of Rome, like Romulus and Remus, who are like also twins. And this is the same for Muri and Halili. They are like two Albanian heroes, brothers, twins, who like go on adventures and protect it, and you know.
Cool. Nice.
But before you ask another question, I would actually like, Cadmus, can you say something about like Skanderbeg and like his resistance against the Ottomans during the Middle Ages?
Yeah, because the interesting fact about Albania, like you said, there is any myth or heroic tales. You can think about mythological ones, but there is a historical event that is the center of Albanian history, and therefore is from this historical events has sprung a lot of tales and legends. Is the Epic of Skanderbeg. Now, Skanderbeg is his pseudonym. His real name was George Castrioti, or George in English, and so he was the son of powerful lord in central Albania, and this lord revolted against the Sultan, and he was defeated, and the Sultan asked for his son as hostages. This was quite a common practice among Turkish people, and especially the Ottomans.
Yeah,
It
the
was
Janissaries, right?
exactly.
Exactly.
And this is a very perverse tradition if you think about it, because it's like a racial war launched against a people. You take the best elements, the children, the future of a nation, and you turn them against their homelands.
Yes.
Anyway,
kind of how they do it here in America, where the coastal elite and the Levantines, they sort of take children from the heartland of America and they turn them against their tradition and their race.
They go to girls go to colleges like sweet girls, and they come out as
not
green
just that,
haired
but like guys, girls,
banshees.
people from the heartland of America just go into the cities and through Jewish propaganda and through other means, they're kind of like Janissaries in that they're raised to rebel against their traditions and their family. So it's a similar instance. And I want to say, like, kind of people in the audience that are white, white Americans, we should seriously take what has happened to Albania and to the Balkans at heed, because like I kind of see a similar situation developing in our country, where people are sort of being turned against their race, against their people, and it's like this international I would say cabal, and this particular kind of group that is doing all this. So we need to like take heed to all these places that have suffered invasion and displacement, because like we are headed in that direction. So go ahead.
so yeah, and so the children were taken as hostages, and to brainwash them, they were converted to Islam. So the young George Castrioti, he was raised as a Muslim boy, and he was trained in the martial arts, and he became a quite successful soldier, quite successful general, and he had the trust of the Sultan. And one day, in, he heard that his father was dead, and the lands were going to be an Ottoman, possession. And the thing is, he never forget about his country, so he gathered some Albanian fighters in the Ottoman army, and they deserted. They went back in Albania, and by a trick, he managed to take back the castle of his father. He raised his flag which is nowadays the flag of Albania, a black two-headed eagle on a red field. And with this event, he sparked a 25 years war non-stop on the Turks. And this was such a huge sacrifice, such a huge commitment for a little nation like Albania against a gigantic power of that time, that it resulted in many deaths in Albanians, sometimes even exile. After the death of Skanderbeg, you see a first wave of Albanians leaving the place because the Turks wanted revenge. But I'm going ahead of myself. When Skanderbeg came back home and declared independence and war on the Ottoman Turks, he managed something quite remarkable. He united the Albanians, not by force, but by calling a gathering, a league, to defend Albania and the Albanians, and this is my interpretation, the traditions and the what was esoteric about the traditions of the Albanians. And through all the symbols that Skanderbeg gathered and that he had on his shield and on his helmet, you understand that there is something that's going way beyond mere Christianity or just Catholicism versus Islam in this fight of Skanderbeg against the Sultan of the Turks. I must precise here that Skanderbeg has been undefeated by the Ottomans. He win victories after victories, and
He never lost the battle.
never lost a battle. And the Pope granted him a title, Atleta Christi, like you are the athlete of the Christ. You are blessed. You suffer no defeat. And this led to magical status to Skanderbeg. Like, oh, this man cannot be defeated. He's granted almost superpowers by the divinity. And after his death, when Albania is conquered, the Turks open his tomb and take his bones as talismans, as magical objects to grant them victory.
I would also like to say something about that. Like, okay, first of all, the two-headed eagle. There's a reason why this eagle has two heads, and people like to associate this symbol with Christianity, especially Orthodox Christianity, but it's far older than that.
Yeah.
The attestations of the two-headed eagle are from like the Hittites. The Hittites were like this sort of Indo-European people who lived in Anatolia, but later on you find two-headed eagles also in the Balkans, like, you know, among the Illyrian stuff. Although it was not a very common symbol. Like, it became more common with Christianity. We have to admit that. But the point of this is that there are two heads but one body, and each head represents a certain power. One head represents the temporal power, like the political power, the secular power, and the other head represents spiritual power, right? So you have, and this is like the political and the spiritual power as one. This is not a very Christian idea. I am of the opinion that the division between religion and state came with Christianity. Before that, like the state apparatus was part of the religion, and this was not in a communist way where like Mao or Kim Jong-un is worshipped, but it was more in the way that, like, you know, the gods created this sort of system, and we have to adhere to it.
It was a folk religion.
Right? Basically, exactly that.
And did he have like a shrine? Did they have pilgrimages?
Within Albania, yes. Actually, yes. Like in South Albania, there is this mountain called Mountain Tomor, and Tomor is also the name of the Albanian sky father. Like in the European paganism, you have this common figure known as the sky father, usually the head of the pantheon. Tomor was the sky father, and the mountain represented him.
Do you guys want to like expand? I mean, I know we're covering this, but have you seen the chat? Like, some people had some comments about this
Who?
event in chat.
About regarding what?
About the
Skanderbeg.
Skanderbeg, yeah. I'll read them for you if you want me to.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
read
go
which
on.
one
Yeah.
was his name
Okay, Third Way
specifically.
Durden said 4th March 1444.
1444, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the date of when the Skanderbeg gathered the different lords
Yeah.
and princes of the
Yeah.
Albanian principalities and like made the league.
And then Albanian Berserker said he said remarkable moment to Kalamindi.
Oh, Kelmendi, yeah.
Tribune of Milicia is responsible for the death of 50,000 Ottomans on the mountains.
Like this is related to a later event. This was I think in the 16th or even early 17th century. Like there's a lot of myth. Okay, historically what happened is that there was this tribe Kelmendi in northern Albania who could just not be subdued because they lived in very harsh terrain, and despite being very poor they were free and didn't want anything to do with the Ottomans. So the Ottomans sent the army in there, and like through guerrilla warfare and through like ambushes and stuff, they killed 50,000 Ottomans. The legend goes that they were actually led by a woman, surprisingly. And this woman was like called Nora Kelmendi, and she was like the local lord, the local Ottoman lord wanted to like marry her, like force her into an arranged marriage with himself. She didn't want to for very obvious reasons. So he basically sent the army to kind of force her out of the village, and her tribe didn't like that, and the war happened, and the Ottomans were defeated.
Okay.
But this is this later event. This doesn't have anything. Like it has to do with Skanderbeg, but it did not happen during this time.
Yeah, well, in Albania you found a lot of warrior women, and this is like a reflection of the Indo-European archetype of the goddess in arms.
Kind of similar to Celtic.
And the Scythians.
Yeah.
And the Scythians.
Yeah, Scythians. Yeah.
Yeah, and
like the Scythians. Go on.
Oh, go. In some legends, you have the very sister of Skanderbeg taking arms and going at war against the Ottomans with him.
Oh, okay, that is interesting. I didn't know that. But yeah, regarding warrior women, I mean, I know that of course, like I believe in gender roles. I believe that the vast majority of women are made for having kids and being a good wife and stuff. Not necessarily in a degrading way. Like I'm against trophy wives and stuff like that. But there are some women. There are always some aberrant women who will be warriors, and there is no way to avoid that. Whatever you do. So, Albanians kind of accepted this fact tacitly, despite us being very patriarchal traditionally. The same could be said for the Celts and the Scythians. Although I think the Celts, as far as European spirituality goes, they were a little bit less patriarchal. But I don't know that much about them.
It does seem that way. I think that's also probably because there's a lot of Neolithic farmer influence in Ireland and the British Isles. That probably is why their pantheon and their spiritual tradition seems a wee bit kind of as you describe, it seems a little bit more like deviated towards the Neolithic kind of farmer archetype.
Yeah, it's possible, but I do not think Albanian warrior women are quite, like are a remnant of Neolithic influence.
Okay.
First of all, it's because we have this mythological creature in Albanian mythology called the Zana, Zana, and oddly enough, she's very similar to the Valkyrie, like to the Germanic Valkyrie. Of course, we don't have an equivalent of Valhalla that we know of, but the Zana basically aids the Albanian warriors, like the male warriors in battle, and she weeps whenever an Albanian male warrior dies, and like kind of takes care of his body after he dies, like in the same way like the Valkyrie takes the body, literally like lifts him up and takes him to the Valhalla with her. So it's like if this is like Neolithic influence, then it must be present in Nordic paganism as well. And I'm also of the opinion that at least as far as the from the 8th to the 3rd century BC, the Scythians were the only pure preservers of Indo-European traditions. Everybody else was like kind of, you know, getting a little bit of Neolithic influence here and Neolithic influence there, etc., etc. But I think we were getting a little bit off topic.
Yes.
Like, shall we go on about Skanderbeg?
Go ahead. And also, is that avatar that you have, is that the captain?
That's Skanderbeg's helmet. This
That's
also has
Skanderbeg's.
esoteric.
Let people
This
know
also
that's
has-
Skanderbeg's helmet, and it's not like a satanic symbol. 'Cause, like, they
Yeah,
say-
no,
No.
it's not.
No,
Okay.
in fact, it comes from, you know, we talked earlier about Ptolemy. And
Yes.
Ptolemy said that in his geography, but as you mentioned, he was also an astronomer.
Yes.
And
Astronomer, yes.
And he said that the Macedonians, the Thracians, and the Illyrians have familiarity with Capricorn.
And
it's-
the Pirates as well.
And sorry? Epirus, yes.
Epirus as well.
And Epirus as well. So you have here quite an interesting connection between these peoples and the Albanians, because Skanderbeg brings back this helmet, this tradition of a goat head on the helmet back to fight against the Ottomans. Why so? Firstly, we can think about some kings that did the same. Like the most famous of them all was Pyrrhus of Epirus. He said to had this helmet with a goat head on it, and when his soldiers saw him like this, they were like, "Oh, this gave them courage to continue fighting against the Romans and all his other enemies." The thing is that if Ptolemy mentions these peoples, is because, you know, they live in an area with many similarities geographically, with a similar way of life, like they were mostly shepherds, and it is said that they choose their kings, and their kings lead them like a shepherd would lead his flock, and the king shepherd has to protect them, and if he fails in war and so on, they choose another king, because when you win in war in the world of the tradition, it means that you are granted supernatural powers by the divinity itself. So the godhead might have some connections here with this old tradition. And I mentioned that Skanderbeg managed to unite Albanians by creating a league, and inside this league he was elected like a primus inter pares as the commander-in-chief of Albanians and the lord of all Albania. Well, that's a way of choosing your king that's very similar of what did the ancient Epirotes people, the ancient Illyrians, or the ancient maybe even the ancient Thracians. Yeah, go on.
Yes, and furthermore, I don't think that because Cadmus said that, I think that, you know, this godhead is connected to the ancient peoples of Illyria, Epirus, and Thrace. But I think, and also Pyrrhus of Epirus, the conqueror. But I think Skanderbeg, you know, Skanderbeg genuinely acknowledged this. Like, we have to keep in mind that when he was fighting his war, the Renaissance in Italy was like fully blown, and this interest in like classical antiquity was very, you know, trendy, quote unquote, to use a very vulgar term. Skanderbeg had many like letters, you know, many letters with Italian warlords by you know, petitioning them for help, because I mean, at the end of the day, he was the lord of a small principality against the biggest empire of his time. And he sometimes did mention Pyrrhus of Epirus and the, you know, the Epiral tribes as ancestors of the Albanians. So he did acknowledge that even he himself did acknowledge that like we are native to the area. Like Skanderbeg, he was humanist. Like in a way, he was a Renaissance man. He was genuinely a Renaissance man, as he could speak multiple languages. He could make reference. He had knowledge of ancient history, at least of Alexander and Pyrrhus. So he wasn't just like some common warlord that just knew the way of the sword and that's it, you know.
Nice.
And this helmet with the goat head has something to do as well with an Indo-European god you might know because he's in the Celtic tradition. It's Cernunnos, you know, the
Keros, the horned
Cernunnos,
god.
the horned god, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I would actually add something further. If you look at the helmet very carefully, there are, you know, just like a little bit below the goat head, there are roses, right? There are these floral patterns, and they are actually roses.
Yeah.
Now they're oh, you can see it from my profile picture, or you can see it very dimly. Actually, I'm sorry, but you can Google it and look it up. And there are 6 roses, which is very interesting because first of all, the rose in the Western esoteric tradition is the equivalent of the lotus in the Hindu and Buddhist esoteric tradition. Like, it's the most holy flower.
By the way, are you guys paying attention to the chat? They have some pretty interesting things to say. Regarding some things.
Balkan mandate of heaven from the groomed sweetie.
Yes.
You could say that. You could actually say that, like, Skanderbeg won, therefore he must have had some sort of mandate of heaven equivalent. Things to remember: the Kanun of Legdugajini. Oh yes, thank you for mentioning that. We actually had forgotten that. It's very important. Albanian mercenaries. Yeah, we wanted to mention that too. There's so much to say, man. Like, we don't we kind of don't know where to start from. So, yeah. Okay. So first of all, about the Kanun of Legdugajini. Legdugajini was an Albanian warlord who was initially a rival of Skanderbeg. He inhabited, like, his principality included what is today northeastern Albania and the western half of Kosovo, which is known in Serbian as Metohija. And he, unlike Skanderbeg, he didn't really mind the Turks. His issue was mostly with the Serbs, because the Serbs were raiding his lands, and he was like, the Turks aren't doing nothing to me. The Serbs are the ones who are bothering me. So what he did, he made a temporary alliance with the Turks in order to keep the Serbs off his lands. But Skanderbeg didn't really like that, so he went to war. Like, he didn't really like the fact that Dukajini had made an alliance with the Turks, so he fought against Dukajini, and by fighting him and defeating him, he basically managed to get into his side. And Legdukajini, during the time where he was like an ally of Skanderbeg, he kind of like codified all the oral laws of the Albanian highlands into one single code, like kind of like a constitution in a way.
Yeah.
And if you analyze that, these laws, like, you could say, like, okay, there is some Christian influence in them, there is some Islamic influence in them, but they date us back, like, modern historians hold that they date us back as the Bronze Age, and they have many commonalities with, like, traditional Indo-European laws. As far as the infanticide of rape babies, to be fair, like, to be quite honest, I don't know about it, but I would not be surprised, like, if Albanians actually did that, like, just take the baby and yeet it off a cliff. And as far as mercenaries, yeah, this is the thing though, like, the Serbs and the Greeks especially in this case like to say, oh yes, like, these evil Muslim Albanians, they are like the lapdogs of the Turks. But we were hired as mercenaries. They gave us money they gave us money, we did their dirty work for them. But this was the same for Western powers too. There were Albanian mercenaries hired by France, hired by Venice, hired even as far as England, and there was even an Albanian regiment who got the Order of Saint George in Russia, meaning that, like, at the time everyone was hiring us as mercenaries. We weren't like the lapdogs of the Turks. We just fought for whoever had the most money. So whatever.
Okay.
Anything else from the chat?
That's it. I mean, I'll
there's nothing. The rest seems to be like memes and stuff.
So are we finished with Skanderbeg, or should we move on also to maybe cover a little bit more about
Well,
Albanian paganism, or is there
well,
anything?
to
Go ahead.
sum up about Skanderbeg, we can say like Drago just said, Albanians became mercenaries after Skanderbeg because they just love to fight. They are real kshatriyas, if you like. And Skanderbeg was like the archetypal
Warrior
Albanian
king.
kshatriya made alive, coming into flesh, and he by his life, by what he did during his life, he set the example for all Albanians worthy of the name. That is to say, defend your tradition, your custom, and your homeland against any odd. And here you have something very reminiscent of all the Indo-European spiritual attitude toward life. Like, okay, there is something I have to do, and I will do it regardless of failure or success. And this is the basically what the Epic of Skanderbeg tells us. And just to make the transition with the Albanian paganism, uh, until 19th century, Albanians consider Skanderbeg to still alive, but he was sleeping somewhere under a mountain. And here you have something that echoes the old Germanic tale of the sleeping emperor. You know, you might heard
Mm.
about it, and as well
Oh yeah. Mm.
as the famous return of the Kalki Avatara. It's the
Okay,
same thing.
because
Yeah, because Albanians were waiting for a return of Skanderbeg to get rid of the sultans and of the Turks once and for all.
okay, to clarify on certain concepts which might be unknown to the audience. First of all, kshatriya or kshatriya, I'm not sure which pronunciation is the correct one. Um, it's the name of the warrior caste in the Vedic India, like basically where the upper castes in India, like in the times when the upper castes of India were white. And when he said like Albanian kshatriya, yeah, he meant like Albanian was like these archetypical Albanian warrior, like member of the warrior caste of Albania. Another thing about the Kalki Avatara, now the quote unquote Hindus hold that the future of like at the end of the Kali Yuga, of the Dark Age, that the earth will be populated by demons or like demonic humans, which will persecute the followers of Dharma being natural law. And Kalki is like the avatar of God, will come down on a white horse and destroy the demons and like bring back natural law and the golden age. The thing is, this whole story of like the hero, the awaited hero, the awaited warrior savior, is very common throughout European spirituality. One very well known example is King Arthur of Great Britain. Another somewhat less known example, but still famous, is Frederick Barbarossa. He was the Holy Roman Emperor during the 12th century, I think. Like when he died, it was also said like he's sleeping in a mountain, he will awaken to save the Germanic people. And for Albania, like the least known example is Skanderbeg of Albania. We say exactly the same. We have this warrior savior who is awaited to come and save the Albanian people from whatever danger comes by. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of like paganism, like, do you guys like have any formalized like pantheon or any type of beliefs in terms of the afterlife or fate or any of these other things that are common with spiritual traditions? Do you guys? I'm not too familiar with Indo-European traditions, but you did mention something about the Sky Father, which I do think is
Mm.
common. That's very common
Oh yeah.
with Indo-Europeans. Also, like, how do they kind of how do they view like the sacred and the profane? And
Mm. 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 Okay, so I will start by saying this, that regarding the pantheon, we have unfortunately very fragmented information regarding the gods. If you want, I could list the gods, but like just listing them, it
No,
would be
that's
very
okay. I mean,
boring.
just maybe list maybe the main one and
Okay, I'll list. Okay, as I said before,
and
Tomor
sort of the
is.
tradition or practice that goes along with
Okay, I'm going to start with Tomor. Tomor is the Albanian sky father. It is also the name of a mountain in southern Albania, and pilgrimage is done by Albanians very often towards that place because it is indeed considered a holy place.
Yeah, it is like the Albanian Olympus, to get
Okay.
the idea.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. That's a very good analogy. And as far as Tomor goes as a deity, he's okay. We like in the European archetypes, like the Sky Father is married to the Earth Mother. You know that.
Yeah.
We also have like the Earth Mother. We call her the beauty of the earth, and she's the wife of she's the wife of the Sky Father Tomor. Tomor controls the winds. He also has an eagle as his main animal, as is very common in like Zeus has an eagle as his main
Yeah.
animal. It is also, I think, the symbol of the Slavic Perun. Pilgrimage, I said. Oh yeah, he's married to the earth. Oh, and there is another story about twins, but this time about twins who are fighting. Like there is a legend about how Tomor, you know, both Tomor and his twin Shqipirag, and Shqipirag is the name of another mountain close by, close to Tomor itself. They basically fell in love with the same woman, which was represented by the river Shkumbe, like Shkumbin. It's called Shkumbin in Albania, and like these two mountains are divided by this river, right? And the legend goes that they weren't divided by these two rivers, but they were fighting for the heart of this woman. But this woman was kind of like didn't want them to fight, and she came across, like she came between the two of them to separate them from one another. And I think she died in some versions, and some others she survived, but kind of rejected both. And the two brothers, from there, like they made peace, but they still kind of kept distance from one another because the woman came between them, you know.
Yeah.
Another thing which is very, very interesting is that Tomor just is connected with wisdom. Like he's seen as a father of wisdom, which is somewhat reminiscent of Odin, despite the fact that it does not have other characteristics which Odin has. Like Odin is like, you know, kind of like the god of battle frenzy, and sometimes he can be very dark in a way. Tomor doesn't quite have that. Like he's, you know, he's the ruling father. Like he doesn't have a dark side, so to speak.
Okay.
Another, like as we said before, is the beauty of the Earth Mother. The Earth Mother also comes across in other legends because, okay, as I said before, the Albanian myth is very fragmented, so some myths may contradict one another. The beauty of the earth in other cases is seen as like a very beautiful woman. She may or may not be a goddess, but she's unmarried, and what's supposed to happen is that like the hero goes on a quest to prove his worth to this, you know, to the Earth Mother, and at the end and after proving himself, he marries her. And there is a very peculiar legend where the hero actually fails to defeat like the dragon, and the Earth Mother kind of takes over for him and defeats the dragon herself, and they still, you know, and she, at the end of the story, she also gets together with the hero despite the fact that he lost. Yeah. Now another deity about which we don't know anything from like direct myth, but we know we
Okay,
can
before
learn.
you say that, are you are you guys, would you consider yourself like kind of reconstructionist? You're kind of like reconstructing the ancient traditions and pre-Christian traditions from, you mentioned fragments. Is this mostly
Yes.
kind of an oral tradition? Is this a written tradition, or is this from linguistics, archaeology, or just kind of this folk tales? How is this being reconstructed? I'm just curious about
Um,
that.
Actually, we don't know. There is no, unfortunately, no written tradition.
Okay.
But it's reconstructed through like the studies of like, you know, folklore,
Okay.
linguistics, certain rituals which are done at certain times of the year, which are like common throughout the entire Indo-European space.
Is there an active revival that's occurring in Albania? to
I'd say
reconstruct?
I would say I don't want to be arrogant or anything. I would say that we are
Okay.
the first ones making a sincere attempt at this. There have been other people, but as it as is usually the tendency with many pagan groups, they descend into degenerate superstition,
Yeah.
cringeworthiness, and Satanism. So
Yeah.
we kind of don't quite count those as our guys. I mean,
Okay.
we would say that we are the first ones.
Okay.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
something about the rituals and so on. There is a specific day in August when people go on the mountain Tamar and they do some sacrifices. And well, it's not called sacrifices nowadays, but they go there to have a meal and so on. But you can still do some pagan stuff there, and of course it's under the guise of Abrahamic religion there. But you can still have some practice. You have this day dedicated to the Mount Tamar, and what I would like to mention is that the name Tamar has an equivalent. You can find it in Epirus, in the well-known site of Dodona. And in Dodona there was an oracle of Zeus, and the mountain that was nearby is called Tomaros, and Tomar and Tomaros are very close, even
no,
in
I think it's
etymology.
actually the same. I think it's actually the same mountain.
How do you?
Yeah, I think it's the same mountain. I mean, it would make sense because there has been an inscription found under Tomor called from, I guess, shrine you could call it, and there is an inscription in like Greek letters saying that it's the shrine of Zeus Tmarus, basically the Zeus Tomor. Like some
Okay.
gods were like had like cannings, or they were like syncretic. And basically, it would be, if this area was often visited by Greeks, it would make sense if like an Illyrian god or Albanian god have been like, compared to a Greek god because they had very similar roles.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is that I have here a book by Martin Lichfield West titled "The Indo-European Poetry and Myth," and in his book he says that okay, the site of Dodona is an Illyrian rather than a Greek institution. So for Dodona, you have plenty of documents about what was going on there, and this can serve as a basis for Albanian reconstruction for paganism. But here you have to settle some things with the Greeks because I think they don't like to hear that Dodona is more an Illyrian rather than a Greek institution.
Dodona being a place which is today found in northwestern Greece.
No,
It
not
used
so
to be
far
considered
from the Albanian border, by the way.
not far from the no, not far at all. Yeah, regarding paganism, should I go on like a little
Yes,
bit
go
with some
ahead.
more
Go ahead.
going
Go
on?
on.
Yeah. Okay. Another god like would be okay. Do you know how? Like the weekdays in European languages are named after
Yes,
gods?
they're named after Norse and
Hmm.
some Greco-Roman deities.
Greco-Roman gods. Now,
Yeah.
the peculiarity in Albania is that the Thursday is not named after the thunder god, which would be like, Giovedì in Italian, which Giove being Jupiter,
Yes.
or like Thursday, Thurs being Thor in Anglo-Saxon and so on. It is named Eni. Eni is a cognate with Agni. Agni being a Vedic god of fire and purification, which is I guess it's kind of interesting. But he is also in Albania. He is associated with fire, so there's this another Indo-European link. Yeah, what else? Okay, we have the actual thunder god is called Perandi. And the name Perandi is also used to this day by Abrahamic Albanians professing to the Abrahamic faiths and calling God by this name. Prende would be the wife of Perandi. She's actually cognate, like her name is cognate with Freya, and she has the same role of like goddess of love and fertility. We have Medaurus, which is the god of war, and I guess these are the main ones. The rest are more minor gods, like they are very very localized, etc., etc. Yeah.
Okay. How about the afterlife? Is there any terms of like any type of afterlife or?
This is not quite. We have like revival of the dead,
Okay.
but this is the thing though. Until the so-called axial age, which would be from the 8th to the 3rd centuries BC,
So
the
it's kind of
Indo-European,
cyclical history, right? Like it's kind of like it goes in cycles.
The thing with Indo-Europeans is that Indo-Europeans weren't really concerned with the afterlife.
Okay.
I think the concern with the afterlife
That's
may
more of a
come as
Semitic trait, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a Semitic trait.
you could say that, but it's also kind of a consequence of of the Dark Age, seeing how
Okay,
things have
yes.
degenerated so much. You kind of want to get out of here. Whereas in the Bronze Age, which the things are a little bit better, you are not concerned with the afterlife because the life you already live in, it's not bad. Like it's pretty good. People
Okay.
still have some virtue and stuff like that.
All right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Julius Evola that stresses it, that in the world of the tradition you have two pathways for the afterlife. You have the path of the ancestors. That means that you have to have children and so on to keep your kin and your name. Just your kin alive, and your tribe and so on. And the other path is the path of the hero, and through heroic actions and deeds, your name lives on, and you yourself are able to how to say to take part in the divinity. And this matches the Albanian point of view, because we don't have mm, we don't have many documents about our ancient gods, but we have lots of heroes, of war heroes, and Skanderbeg is the most famous of them all. So you see a common trend here.
If we could like go on a little bit and talk about like the influence of communism, fascism in Albania.
Well, okay. Just briefly before you do that, yeah, go ahead. I was just gonna say maybe towards the end you could talk a little bit about that weird kind of Sufism that exists in Albania
okay.
called Bektashi Sufism, which it's of interest to me. It's not really the audience doesn't have much interest in it.
Yeah.
I was noticing that there is a little bit of a weird connection of Bektashi Sufism to like some of the early foundations of the Thule Society, which I found odd, but it does exist. Either that or it's like probably some, I don't know, probably some revisionist history that's been interjected there by academics or bias academics. I'm not certain, but go ahead. Talk a little bit about the advent of sort of the political upheaval that occurred in the. I guess we can kind of bookend the pagan discussion. I mean, is there any other thing you guys want to cover with the pagan discussion?
I mean, I was kind of trying to see if the audience had any questions about paganism, like more specific questions.
Okay, do you guys before we end and we go more into like the political, geopolitical, and kind of political discussion, modern era politics, do you guys have any more discussion about the paganism?
I'm done. I'm done. Cadmus.
Same with me here.
Okay, so let's get into the sort of like the advent you mentioned of neoliberal democracy and also communism, and well as third position politics, and how that interplays in historically in Albania. How did that happen, and what caused a lot of political upheaval post the Ottoman period, Ottoman occupation?
Do you want to take this one or should I?
Yeah, I can take it.
And some people, before you say that, some people want to talk about hoaxa too. It's kind of a meme.
About what?
Yeah,
Hoxha.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, yes, we will talk about him. But first, to set the context, you had Skanderbeg, so it's the medieval era. You have Ottoman conquest that lasted 500 years, and then in 1912 Albania became independent, and so you had a society that remained in traditional worldview that came in 20th century and had to adapt itself with democracy and all these kind of things. And what happened in Albania was political turmoil and Game of Thrones there. And in the 1920s, you have a figure called Hamed Zogu, but despite his first name being Hamed, he was not a devout Muslim, and he later became king of the Albanians. So, and he dropped his first name because it was too Muslim for him, and he was a Muslim indeed. He was a Muslim, and he managed to marry a Hungarian noble, a countess named Geraldine of Nagy Aponi, and it was this unusual royal couple with a Muslim monarch and his wife a Christian. But this was not, for Albanians, it was nothing special about it. Say, okay, great, because as we mentioned, religion in that time in Albania, it didn't have many importance. But the thing is that, just to mention it, in the 30s, you had a lot of study about by some raciologists about Albanians, and I remember reading some of them. You have, for example, I think Hans Gunther. He was a German anthropologist, and he did some racial studies, and he underlined the fact that in northern Albania you have many Nordic strain in Albania. You have as well an Albanian guy. He was named Jakov Milaj, and he wrote a book about the race of the Albanians, and he underlined in this book as well the the pagan orientation of the Albanian soul, because he did this thing, a la Julius Evola, the race of the body and the race of the spirit. And in the race of the spirit of the Albanians, he said, okay, they are Muslim on the paper, but really deep down they are just pagans. They don't give a fuck about the pillars of Islam or about what's written in the Bible. They follow their own mind. And one book that you can find online is by Carlton Kuhn, and it's called The Mountains of Giants, because he went in northern Albania, and there the Albanians are quite tall, and he said, okay, I'm among giants here, and he did a very interesting study about the northern Albanian. Anyway, about the political situation in Albania, you had this king Zogu, and he was a monarch and quite like a Bonapartist. He came from a rich and wealthy family. He was prime minister, then president, and then he crowned himself king. But for some Albanians, he was okay, but for some others, his rule was not strong enough. And there were some Albanian intellectuals, and one of them is Met Toto, and he had a very clear idea of what should be an Albanian monarch. He had three examples in mind back at the time. Firstly, Atatürk, the famous Turkish leader. This Turkish leader is known because he gets rid of all the Islamic stuff and modernized and westernized Turkey. So for Ismet Toto and the other Albanians intellectual of this time, it was the first step for Albania, getting rid of all the mosques, of all the Islamic stuff that had remained because of Ottoman occupation. Then after, he had in mind Hitler, the Führer himself, because Hitler had a clear view of the Volksgemeinschaft, the community of people, and the need to preserve and develop racially the German people. And so Ismet Toto and the likes were very fond of this idea and said, okay, Albania should do the same. And the third step would be the Italian state of Mussolini, the fascist state. And in Italy, you had a king, you had a duce as well. And Ismet Toto and the likes were thinking, okay, we need a monarch that should be a central figure, a central character for the Albanian, and with a strong government around him. Because for these intellectuals, the Albanian government was still stuck back in the Ottoman era, and they were not able to face what was coming in the 20th century. And this led these intellectuals, to uprise in 1937. It was an uprising not against the king, but an uprising to tell the king, get rid of all these people around you that prevent you from having a truly nationalistic policy. And it's quite surprising because you had a rather similar uprising, but in the other side of the world, in Japan in 1936, when some officers revolted against the emperor, which is considered there as a god, to tell him, get rid of your government that don't recognize you as the god that you are. And both uprising failed. I found this quite interesting because they had the same mentality about their monarch, despite being at the two sides of the world. And the thing is that Japan is another Axis power, and I've already mentioned Italy and Germany. And speaking of Axis power, in 1939, Italy invaded Albania. They invaded Albania. King Zog went in exile, and we have to say that Italians came in 1939. The war started in September 1939. They didn't have many time to think about Albania, but for the little time that they stayed in Albania, they accomplished much more than the Ottomans did for 500 years. You know, they built roads and hospitals, and like if you go in Tirana nowadays, you will find plenty of fascist architecture all around. The Albanian parliament, the ministries, etc., etc. And the little known fact is that if you, not today, but back then, if you take a ride in an airplane above Tirana, you will see that the streets are like the Italian fascio, you know, the axis and the fascists that are the symbol of fascism. In fact, Tirana was designed to the roads in Tirana were designed to do this symbol when you fly over. So the Italian didn't stay long either, because they capitulated in 1943, and then the Germans come in. Sorry. So the German come in, and they say, okay, Albania, you are independent now, and the Albanian patriarchal system was aware that this war, the Second World War, was a war between tradition and or anti-tradition, capitalism and communism. And
don't forget our Levantine friends as well caused it.
Oh yeah.
Sorry?
Don't forget our Levantine friends. Oh
You
God.
know who he means.
What
Oh
was
yeah.
it? Yeah.
Okay. And to help in the fight against communism in the Balkans, the German created an SS Waffen division made of Albanians, and it was named the SS Skanderbeg. So the SS Skanderbeg went on anti-communist actions all around Albania, and I should mention here that at the time Albania was not just what Albania is today. At the time, Hitler and Mussolini gave to Albania Kosovo, some territories in the actual North Macedonia, and some parts in Montenegro as well, creating thus the Great Albania, or the ethnic Albania, as Albanian nationalists call it. And this was a goal of Albanian nationalism since the 19th century. Yeah.
But like the war was eventually lost, and like the thing was this, that many Albanians didn't like the Italians coming in. Like ideologically, Albanians don't mind fascism, but they did not like the fact that it was being brought by a foreign people. Now the communists, the communists capitalized on this during the war and said like, oh yes, like we have to fight off the Italian invaders and be free as our own people, which on principle, yeah, they were sort of right. But the thing is, the communists were themselves financed by the Yugoslavs. The Albanian Communist Party was financed by Serbian Yugoslavs. And they were the ones who made Enver Hoxha the leader of the party and killed off pretty much everyone who stood in his way. They were the ones who and Hoxha actually wanted to unite Albania to Yugoslavia, but Stalin and Tito had like this row, because Tito didn't want to go full communist, so Hoxha kind of abandoned his alliance with Joseph Tito. But the thing is, he still left Joseph Tito Kosovo. He still did, like he still gave Kosovo over to Yugoslavia. So that's that. And during the communist era, it was a completely totalitarian state of the degree which like makes North Korea today seem like a joke.
Yeah, it was the North Korea of Europe, basically.
Yeah, and
so white Juche gang, white Juche gang.
Yeah, but it wasn't fun, man. Like the memes are funny, but it wasn't fun.
Okay.
Like basically, the state literally encouraged you to spy on your own father, or like spy on your own children. It literally divided the family unit in a very, very brutal way. Another thing that it did is that it killed off all the intellectuals, and because of that, Albania kind of experienced this brain drain.
To be fair, though, a lot of the intellectuals in general are sort of subversive.
But the thing is, this is the issue, though, because in other countries, it's usually the working class who is nationalistic and the intellectual class who is subversive. In Albania, it's the opposite.
Really?
The working class, oh yes, the working class will sell you for a donut, whereas the intellectuals are usually the nationalistic ones.
That's weird.
At least that's how it used to be until the 40s.
Groom Sweetie's correct, man. The Balkans really is hard to understand. It's hard to understand. It's sort of like it's sort of like the Twilight Zone of Europe.
Pretty much. So basically all the nationalist intellectuals were killed.
So go ahead and continue and say how it was under Hoxha.
Under Hoxha.
Hoxha, I mean.
Yeah,
sorry.
basically. And what Hoxha also did is like he was a conservative Marxist. He wasn't one of these intersectional, gender queer, blue-haired feminists of America today. No, he was like he did uphold certain traditions, but he was very picky about it. Like he only like when it came from Albanian culture, he only kept what he liked, and he discarded what like was inherently anti-communistic. So it did, despite the fact that some parts of Albanian culture were preserved, many others were just like destroyed completely. And then came the liberal democracy, which like destroyed even these remaining parts and like this whole cosmopolitan poison. And regarding the liberal democracy in 1997, Albania had a civil war, and if Albanians had been smart and aware enough back then, we could have installed a nationalistic government ruled by good people, and Albania could have been better than what it is today. But as it usually is, the good guys don't win. So yeah.
Yeah, well, you said civil war. In fact, it was more than it was more the state collapsing. Like, okay, the state is a failure. There is no more state, and people, Albanian did the first thing they did. They pick up guns because the Handre Hoxha take out the guns from them. And as we said earlier, Albanians love guns and arms because they have this warrior spirit. And when they were free, they go on to take guns, and the state collapsed on itself, and it was just anarchy. It was not really civil war like the north against the south or whatever. No, it was just Albanians roaming around with no state to tell them don't do this, don't do that. The thing is that it was a clear moment where opportunities could be taken, and the son of the former king tried. He came back in Albania. He had his supporters there, and they went on in Tirana with guns and so on. But he failed his attempt to be the king of Albanians. So Albania might have a king now. It might have a nationalistic government. It was really a missed opportunity.
Yeah. And furthermore, what happened next was like a complete tragedy, like just a downfall. Like, okay, in the 2000s, Albania kind of kept some of its traditions. It was like, it was still a community-based country. Like, if you would, like me, if I went around the streets of my hometown in 2000 Tirana as a child, they wouldn't ask me, like, old people wouldn't ask me, what's your name? But they would ask me, whose son are you? Because everyone knew everyone. And if you said, like, oh yeah, I'm the son of XYZ, they pretty much would know who you were, in the 2010s, however, everything started being degraded. First of all, since 2008, we have had the same prime minister who is like someone who has been in cahoots with George Soros for a very, very long time. And ever since the early 2010s, liberalism in Albania made some really huge jumps and leaps. Like, let me put this into perspective. For there to be people in America who accept homosexual marriage and like who actually wanted to pass as a law, it took several like quote-unquote reforms from the late 60s to the late 2010s, which is like this is a period of 40-50 years. In Albania, we went from completely homophobic to like homophile within the course
Really?
of about 5 to 10 years.
Really,
Well, not
that's
completely,
sad.
but
That's
at least
concerning. That's concerning.
like at least in the capital city. Like, I'm not talking about the smaller cities, but the thing is this: the capital city has 1 million inhabitants, which is about 1/3 of Albania's population. The rest of the country has 2 million people in total. So what happens in the capital city affects a very significant number of the
That's kind of
Albanians
like
who live in
it's kind of like
Albania.
America. In America, mainly the urban areas are the most paused, and the rural areas still are starting to get a lot of overflow from the capital cities and from the large cities. Eventually, it does travel into the heartland, and that's kind of what we're going through America right now. Is we're going through the global homo sort of plague that's infesting our central heartland. Sounds like that's what you guys are going through. And
Yeah, pretty
this
much.
you mentioned this liberalism. Was this because of that civil war that occurred?
No. It
Okay.
wasn't because of the civil war. It was, I mean, very indirectly. Like, okay, in the the civil war, or like the state collapse occurred. Other people in Albania took power, and it was at first it was like the nominally conservative party, but like there is no conservatism in Albania. There was just a bunch of thieves who took power by force, but at the very least they took it by force. And in the 2000s, Albania has still had like kind of like a strongman culture. You know what I mean? Like I was a kid in Albania back then, and there were like street fights, massive street fights, pretty much once every 2 days. You know, so there was like this degree of honor, even if it was very degenerated from what Albanians used to have in ages past. You know, but this strongman culture started diminishing by the end of the 2000s, and in the beginning of the 2010s, you know, the local gangster was replaced by the local soy boy,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's where things, you know, started going downhill. It was like a direct consequence of the civil war, but you can kind of pinpoint the civil war as a missed opportunity, and things going in the wrong direction ever since then.
Okay. Also, let me
Oh yeah,
clarify. Go ahead.
and as I said, regarding the people who took power in Albania, like just because communism fell in Albania, don't think that it's completely gone. Like I mentioned, our prime minister is a very like has literally private meetings with George Soros. What I forgot to mention is that after communism fell, like it was, you know, the fathers, like the older communists kind of like got away, most of them, not all of them, but it was their sons and their nephews and their other younger relatives who took power. But it's basically the same criminal blood who rules us, and we just went through a shift from like conservative Marxism to the SJW style Marxism.
Internationalist.
Yeah, from
Yeah.
like, you know, the semi
Kind of
From
this.
Stalinism to cultural Marxism.
Yes.
yeah, basically
Liberalism. There really.
Yeah.
I have to be honest. There really isn't not a whole lot of thing called cultural Marxism. It's really just neoliberalism.
Yeah, just neoliberalism, but like
Yeah.
neoliberals have created this cultural Marxist meme in order to like have like a straw man
Yeah.
and say like, oh yeah, we're different from this communist, when in fact they're just the other side of the coin.
Anyway, I want to ask you a pertinent question. However, many of the nationalists are apprehensive to align themselves with your cause because, well, you guys are majority Muslim, and we understand that kind of doesn't influence your outlook. But they're still apprehensive because I've heard, someone in the chat mentioned something about how Albanians are involved in smuggling the sex ring of white women into like the Middle East. Is that true?
I wouldn't know anything about that, to
Okay.
be honest. I wouldn't know anything about that.
I just wanted to cover. I don't want to like.
I
hope
understand.
that doesn't offend you, but like I said, your reputation, Albania's reputation kind of precedes them. I just wanted to like clarify that.
Yeah, I mean, not that I know of, but regarding sex trafficking in general, I mean, back in the day when the mafia was not like state organized, there were like sex trafficking rings, but they were no different from like Russian or Romanian sex trafficking rings in
Well,
Europe.
most of the Russian sex trafficking is controlled by Russian Jews.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
that
think
doesn't
that
surprise.
our
You didn't
best
know that?
ally is.
You didn't know that?
No, I
You didn't
didn't
know
know
that?
that.
You didn't know
No,
Russian Jews control most of the underworld?
no.
Yeah, they do.
Huh.
Well, I
That
know
doesn't
about this.
surprise me.
Russian Jews and Ukrainian Jews.
Yes.
But I think that if we have to compare the mafias, the Albanian mafia, okay, is quite something, but not quite something as the Israeli mafia.
Okay.
Yeah, but so that's so much about it. But like the thing is, you know, when it comes to Albanian nationalists, like you're kind of barking up the wrong tree, mate, by telling us that like, oh yeah, these Albanians are bad. Because if it were up to us, these
I'm not.
people.
I'm just letting you know that I'm not. I am trying to be
I know,
partial.
I know. You no. This is like directed at the audience, and the
Okay.
guy who said like, you know, the trafficking of white women into the Middle East. Like you're barking up the wrong tree, mate. Like if it were up to me pimping in Albania would be a capital offense. So
Yeah, these guys are nationalists and they are third positionist and they are against that kind of degeneracy. You know, they're
hopefully, because let's be fair here, I've known many pure white Aryan 6'3", 6'4" Aryan Nordic Americans who call themselves National Socialists, but like consume or even traffic drugs. So many of them are even siege built, surprisingly. So
okay.
whatever.
Yeah, we have a little bit of a problem in America with white nationalism. It's sort of in a disarray presently. Hopefully there will be some reformation, or there'll be some people that will, hopefully
At
save.
this rate, the coronavirus is gonna kill us all, Nate. So
So anyway, I didn't mean to get off track. Is there like anything, because we're nearing towards the end, is there anything that you want to cover before like we kind of before I before I shut it down?
I actually, yes, I want to expand a little bit on the current Albanian
Okay,
political
go ahead.
past.
Tell us a little bit about the present position and maybe also about the 1987 Civil War, how that kind of ties into things. I think they,
Le-
Third Way Durden mentioned that in the chat, but go ahead.
Um, oh yeah, and another thing. Okay, so first of all, as I mentioned before, they are neo-Marxists, and
Yes.
like they are at least tacitly neo-Marxist, and like you can see over the years, you can see the like exponential increase in blue-haired feminists in the streets
Oh
of
yeah, yeah.
Tirana. Um, Another thing that I forgot to mention, but this is kind of actually self-evident to many European nationalists, is this very unholy and at a first glance very contradictory alliance between Islam and neo-Marxism. Now, most Islam in Albania, like most of the Islam which is being shelled today and unfortunately increasing in numbers of believers, is not like ISIS style Islam. There is some of that, but most of it is like Turkish, the hip, modern, hipster, whatever Turkish
Yes.
Islam, which kind of tries to portray itself as like we're the cool guys in here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And the Turkish influence in Albania has increased exponentially over the years. Let me tell you this: 10 years ago, if you went out on the streets of Albania or in Kosovo and straight up scream, "I fucking despise Turks," nobody would give a shit about it. Most people would agree, and those who would not agree, they just wouldn't care. They would have no strong opinion on this. Now, go out on the streets and say, "I fucking despise Turks," and yes, a good
Hello?
chunk of the people will agree with you, but there will be many. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically there will be unfortunately many people who genuinely love the Turks because they have been in the mosques. They have been told falsehoods about the history of Turkish occupation and the history of Islam in Albania. They have Islam has been portrayed to them as like the natural religion of Albania, and Turks as our like natural brothers.
Yeah,
Um,
they
it,
try to say like, hey, you see, Austro-Hungarian Empire. Well, Ottoman Empire was like that, but it was Turkish and Albanians. This is pure propaganda because under the Ottoman era, no Albanian school was allowed, nothing to develop or teach the Albanian language, anything of that.
yeah, we did not have an actual codified Albanian alphabet until quite late. Why? Because the Turks didn't like that. Yeah, as I was saying, like the influence of Turks in Albania is really increasing, and it's not even Islamic. It's also like in these more secular trends, like the way you probably don't see that in the Appalachians, but people in the audience who may be from Western Europe know how this Turkish style 5 o'clock shaved beards and like this disgusting haircuts who like which the Turks take up, and like Albanians try to emulate them. Like it's only
Yeah, somebody in the chat is actually asking about that. They're asking about the what's up with the Turk and Albanian
yeah,
alliance in
that's pretty
Germany
much
and
what I'm
Scandinavia.
talking about. Well, that's
Okay.
pretty much what I'm talking about. 10 years ago, Albanians no self no proud, no self-dignified Albanian would have like freely hang out with Turks. Now, with this unholy alliance between Marxism and Islam, which the neo-Ottoman Empire or like Erdogan's Turkey is capitalizing on, this whole Albanian-Turkish alliance is being promoted. But Turks didn't have a good opinion of us back then. They don't have a good opinion of us now, and they're pretty much just using us and tricking us and fooling us, and we're fool enough to fall for it. There's nothing else to say. That's how simple it is. So yeah, I know that in the West there are a lot of like white trash Albanians hanging out with Turks.
Yes, there actually is, believe it or not, and Bosnians as well.
And Bosnians as well. Why? Because the Turkish propaganda is portraying this whole story as like they are our brothers and our protectors and bullshit like that. It's all bullshit, mate. It's all bullshit. They just want to expand again.
Okay, so it's because of some sort of weird Muslim liberal alliance.
Exactly. It's the same. It's see it as being an analog to like feminists in the West hanging out with Muslims, or like
Yes,
fucking white women dating non-white guys because the media
that's
told
cringe.
them to. It's the same. Like it's the same.
Same level.
It's the same level. It's the same thing, just on a little bit different, on two different fields, basically.
Okay, I think Third Way Durden was asking about the anti-Turk riots.
Oh, I don't know much about that. I'm sorry. Like, I don't. This is the thing about us as a group. We don't quite follow the news. We're more like We speak more metapolitics than actual
That's why
politics.
I wish Third Way would have been able to come on here tonight, because like he's an Albanian that I know.
Yeah.
Quite a good guy too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything more that you guys want to cover? It's been a
I
good
can't
conversation.
think of anything at the moment, to be
Okay.
honest.
Well, to expand on the topic of this alliance between liberals and Islamic influence in Albania, you have to keep in mind that the communism in Albania, Enver Hoxha, had destroyed so much of Albanian tradition that after the fall of communism, people were left with an identity vacuum, and this vacuum had to be filled by something. And for new generations, generation born and raised in Albania or in Western Europe, it will be sometimes their faith, and they will have an understanding of this faith because of all the Arabic people or niggers they have in Germany or France or England that will say, hey, you have to not to eat during the holy month of whatever, or you have to avoid eating pork, things that Muslim Albanians never really cared about. But this identity vacuum that you can feel throughout Europe and America has to be filled by something, and this something will be, you have the choice. It will be an Abrahamic religion, universal, with universal, where Albanians, niggers, Nordic Europeans, Chinese, or whatever can be part of, and it will result in a mixing pot, or it will be something more identitarian and nationalistic. And this is the choice of the 21st century. And speaking of that choice, I would like to mention here quickly what is happening right now in Greece. You have the
Yes, the
so
Boogaloo, the Peloponnesian Boogaloo.
yeah, yeah, indeed. So you have this Turkish leader that opens his border to all the migrants from Syria, but in fact they are from Pakistan or from Uganda, and he wants to send them in Europe. And Greece is right here, right now, defending Europe. And we as Albanians, as third positionist Albanians, we congratulate them. Okay, Greek people, you're doing a great job. Okay, we had some difficulties and we like to quarrel like Balkanic people, but this time you're defending Europe, and we are standing with you on this one.
Nice.
Yeah, I actually forgot to mention that. Yes, as I said, this like despite our old Balkan quarrels, I don't actually hate our quote unquote rival countries. These are situations where like the winner is the one who tends to keep a cool head, and if Albanians can keep a cool head, we will come on top of our neighboring rivals. But at the moment, like the main thing is not to quarrel about semi-irrelevant strips of land in the Balkans. The point is to like
Yeah, what's the
common
point if
defend.
all the niggers came and okay, all the Balkans become black?
Yeah,
What's the
basically,
achievement?
it's to prevent that, and you know, like we have to wake up and not kind of understand this and get
Yeah,
our
I
but
shit
hope you guys. I
together.
hope if there is like a war that breaks out and like between Greece and like Turkey and Russia and Syria and all and that potentially happens. I hope you guys pick the right side. I hope
But
you guys
the thing,
definitely pick the right side.
first of all, it's out of our hands. But even
Okay.
as well, even if we're pro-Turkish, we have to keep in mind that Greece is still the main investor in Albania. Like they
Yeah.
when it comes to like foreign investments, they still, you know, Turkey is still in only in third place. First of all, and second of all, our army is too small to make a difference anyway. So what will probably happen if an open war breaks out will just be like different factions of Albanians kind of quarreling over Facebook about this or that, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think we will actively participate.
That's good to, I mean, I'm just saying there is like a potential for like a war breaking out, it seems. And let me just say,
Yeah, yeah.
Turkey in itself is a instrument of Zog. It is a product of Zog.
Absolutely,
It is a
absolutely.
satellite of American Zog, and it is one of the pillars over there that's sort of made as a to control sort of the Middle East. It's the Middle Eastern portion of Zog. It's the Middle Eastern arm of Zog, and it's the Middle Eastern arm
Mm.
of America. And they are totally aligned with the interest of the neoliberal globalist and Israeli interest and Zog interest.
The funniest thing about it is that Erdogan is so over the top and so overreaching so much in this case because of his own personal ambition, narcissism, that not even Zog is kind of like fully supporting him because they literally can't stand him. He's
Yeah.
Erdogan is a fucking cold-blooded retard. Like regardless of whatever agenda he might have, I think in this case he's going like, you know, kind of
And
going.
I just want to reiterate, I don't support the Kurds either. They are also an instrument of Zog.
No, when it comes to the Kurds, I don't really care about them. You know,
I don't care about them
like
either. I'm just
as
saying
hard as it may sound, like
no, I don't care about them either. I'm just saying that they're
don't have.
also an instrument. They're an instrument of Zog,
Mm, yeah.
As are the Druze. But we're getting into like kind of
Oh, Druze,
esoteric.
that's interesting. I thought because like there was this Druze guy in the Syrian civil war who like held held the city against an ISIS siege for like 5 years in a row.
Yeah,
So it's interesting that the Druze are like an instrument, but hey,
they
who
are.
knows?
They're a lot of them are fighting for the IMF. But
Interesting.
that's another story for another time. And you guys have any closing remarks before I close it out? Because I want to keep this like kind of.
I actually, yes, I would have like a
You got any
well,
plugs? Anything you
I
want to
would have
plug?
like a polite request
Okay.
and a piece of advice. The polite request regarding nationalists in Europe is that, you know, this whole normie bullshit with like Albanians supposedly loving the Turks or whatever, take it with a grain of salt. It's not representative of all of us or of what we should be or what we aim to be. And the piece of advice would be get your shit together.
Yeah. How about you, Cadmus?
Well, for me, I say the place of Albania is in Europe. Europe is our motherland, we can call it like this, and all Albanian will feel the name should fight for Europe, just like Skanderbeg did fight for Europe, even though he received no aid, but no help. But it's okay. We will do what must be done, fight for Europe until the end.
Okay. And with that said, guys, it's been a nice conversation. I'm hoping
Likewise.
we've learned a lot. Hopefully, someday down the line, you guys can come back on some other time. I really do appreciate you stopping by and explaining your story and
Hmm.
setting a lot of things straight. That's been nice. I hope it hasn't been too harsh on you,
No, I don't really
No,
mind.
it was great. Thanks for
and
having us on.
yeah, it's been interesting. And I by the way, I want to. This is an invitation to other nationalists in Europe. I want to hear your story. I want to hear a Greek story, and this is what this surviving via America is for. It's mainly for kind of the European diaspora, that is white people in America, but primarily not exclusively for their story. I want to hear more about European nationalists across Europe, northern, western, Balkans, you name it. If you're a European nationalist out there and you have a story, I want to cover your story. I want to hear your story, and I want you to feel like you have a home here on Surviving via America, because I am dedicated to white Americans and most kind of to Appalachia in general, but I extend my invitation to other whites out there that are struggling globally, because it's not just Zog, and the UN is inflicting us all, stealing our traditional heritage, destroying us, from through their neoliberal policies. And I hate to say it, even America in itself is now an instrument of Zog. It has lost its sovereignty. It's lost its sovereignty, it's lost its autonomy, and now it is an instrument of globalist Zog factions, which is various different arms. It's like an octopus stretching over the planet, choking out the life of the Aryan and European soul. And I just want to say that I want to invite anybody